Communism and socialism, the new buzzwords. Now, are we being fooled? Of course we are. What you've been told is that over and over again, there is an enemy, and they are peddling evil concepts that violate our American values. The reality is a lot different. Today I'm speaking to the ultra-conservative and the ultra-liberal. As I've mentioned in other videos, researchers such as Pew Research have shown that the majority of Americans do not support either extreme. That means they don't believe in the enemy party theory. So I'm speaking to those that do believe in it. Here's the point. The two-party system is not set up to serve Republicans or Democrats, Rust Belters, or so-called urban elites. It's like two junior varsity teams that care about winning. Except that there's nothing to win, and you lose. Either side gains if you accept propaganda, and you get nothing in the end. Have you noticed the feeling you get about your favorite sports team is the same feeling you get about your party? The hatred you feel for the enemy team is like the hatred you feel for the enemy party. This is about tribalism, not politics. There's a big difference between the two, one that should concern you. Sports is simple. You either win or lose. But the welfare of millions of people does not depend on it. Not true with our political system. By millions of people, I mean, well, that means you. Really. Should you let the same emotions that get you worked up about your favorite team drive your political decisions? That depends on your concern for the health of your country. Now, lately we've been showered with buzzwords. We hear them and we don't think. We simply accept their truth. This has happened in the past, and the results have always been awful. I won't go too far into history because, like buzzwords, you have to find the truth for yourself. But considering the topic of this video, if you're interested, I would look up Joseph McCarthy. All I'll say is we've been through this bit of misdirection once already in the 50s regarding communism and socialism. Thousands of lives were ruined for no reason, and we gained nothing by it. And then it became unimportant for decades. So why is it important now? Do I believe in socialism and communism? Will conservatives hate me? Will Bernie Sanders love me? No, sorry. I know that would make things easier since I'm complaining about this. But as you're about to see, I'm not a fan of either. Yes, it's possible to disagree with one or the other party and not be part of the enemy party. In fact, it's very possible not to care about either party. I know that shocks some of you. This article is about my disgust over the ease with which wool is pulled over our eyes. If you've seen my other videos on this channel, you know I'm not taking sides in the partisan theater. I think that the evil is not the Dems or the Republicans, it's the two-party system, and that both sides of the aisle are greedy and power-hungry. And there are corporate interests that manipulate both parties. And therefore, they manipulate us. We are being suckered. That means you. I don't think you'll see that until you don't take things you hear for granted. That's the message of this channel. What's interesting about this particular bit of propaganda is that both sides have made use of it for their own purposes. Here are the two myths. All forms of socialism are evil and will hurt us. Or, myth 2, democratic socialism is a superior form of government. Bernie Sanders is someone I do not consider a credible representative of the Democratic Party and is also as ultra-liberal as you can get in mainstream politics. Sanders takes the view, saying that socialism is good, no surprise, as shown by the example of Denmark. Guess what? Denmark, as their representatives will tell you endlessly on sites on the internet, is an active free market capitalist system. Sanders either lied or is not good enough in understanding his own beloved democratic socialism, which is pretty disturbing since that's one of his calling cards. He's another squirrel-yard bully trying to manipulate the people who follow him. Of course, I've heard countless conservatives, both on television and at work, say socialism is evil and doesn't work in any form. Communism is considered pretty much one step farther on from democratic socialism. Well, that's another myth, as you'll see. My concern with what I'm about to discuss is not what side of the partisan divide has spun which myth about socialism and communism, but the fact that these are myths and that we are being fooled. What is worse is that all powerful people have to do is mention something once and it's accepted as truth. Trump, Bernie Sanders, it doesn't matter. I know many of you feel that anything Trump says has to be true. And there are certainly quite a few die-hard Bernie fans that treat him like a 60s messiah. Well, from my point of view, he isn't. Now, this issue came about based on something a coworker said to me. He often takes swipes at me by suggesting that he's got my political views worked out because I'm not ultra-conservative. Since I'm not all the way to the right, this coworker thought I must be all the way to the left. That's another myth that's become popular. So here are a couple of other myths. All conservatives are corporate trickle-down economics Ebenezer Scrooge stooges. 2. All Democrats are ridiculous knee-jerk liberals. Right. So you don't think I'm a liberal, and just for you ultra-conservatives, so you may take this argument seriously, I'll tell you what I think about communism and socialism. Communism was developed by a scholar named Karl Marx, who spent most of his life in the library. His experience with the gritty real world was limited, and I believe he wanted his name on something because that is the gold standard in academics. Many people forget that the other name for communism is Marxism. Communism is a theory of what might happen if man was kind to man, and no one took advantage of anyone else. And that's where it fails always. There is a reason that every country that has become communist also has become a brutal dictatorship. Once the good of the people is entrusted to communist leaders, it's only a matter of time before they become dictators. Communism is a dismal failure that has never been a viable system. As of this moment, there are only 5 communist countries in the world. 5. China is pretty much a pretty poor communist country. What communist country could possibly have a stock exchange and a blossoming economy that is close to surpassing ours? The communist part of the U.S. that became the subject of the Red Scare of the 50s never became the boogeyman that the fearmongers said it would be. Until recently, no one has even mentioned communism, despite the infamous Red Scare of the 50s. As of now, there are about 10,000 members of the American Communist Party. Have you noticed it's never mentioned in the news, and there usually aren't many, if any, candidates for public office that call themselves communists? Yes, I think communism sucks. It always will, and it has died the death it deserved. There are more important issues that we don't need to create new disasters and a new boogeyman to make us ignore what is truly important to us. We are in a pandemic right now. And before that, we had serious economic issues and even more serious infrastructure issues. You are being fooled. Communism is a failure, but like in the 50s, it's being used as a boogeyman to take advantage of your anger and give it a place to lay. But when it comes to the survival of our country, we can't afford to give in to those emotions because we are not the point. The nation is. Democratic socialism, as opposed to communism, if you believe that they are different, is a mixed bag, even though many people feel it's just a few steps from communism. In many ways, democratic socialism is as big a failure as communism. Whether a country is actually democratic socialism depends on your point of view. For instance, would you be horrified by the idea of living in Portugal? My uncle lived there for decades, and he was as political as my dog. But many people call it democratic socialist. The same is true of Ecuador. There are many other countries that hover on the edge of democratic socialism with high taxes and numerous social programs. But in fact, most of them also have an element of free market capitalism, and none of them would offend your American sensibilities. One official in Denmark made it clear in a video I saw that the Danes had considered full-on democratic socialism and found that it didn't work. Sorry, Bernie. Would you be afraid of the political system in Ireland, that it might invade the U.S. and undermine our way of life? Do you think Ireland is an evil, decadent country? Well, you might want to know that Ireland has the most active welfare system in the world. The point is, hearing that socialism is evil is not enough. Keep in mind, this was not an argument even a few years ago. No one really talked about socialism. It came about in the new wave of say it and it's true propaganda that we've seen recently. Bernie Sanders touts it as a panacea when it's simply a complex set of issues that is very different from country to country. So how can it be a perfect system? So much like communism, democratic socialism barely exists. Here's the point. I've heard a number of people say that socialism is evil and yet they don't know where the evil is. What are the countries that practice evil socialism? If you think that democratic socialism is automatically evil, do you actually know what countries practice it? Has it ever occurred to you that that might be an important issue? The evil has to exist somewhere, and if you don't know where it exists, then it may not exist at all. Don't listen to Bernie Sanders. Don't listen to Nancy Pelosi. Don't listen to Donald Trump. But he's right in talking about fake news. What you may not have considered is that it's coming from both conservative and liberal news outlets. Are communism and socialism really our problems, as worthless as they may be? Or are our problems, the ones that kick us in the face, really the ones we need to deal with? The opioid epidemic, the lack of raises for the last 10 years, the incredible and dangerous growth in the pharmaceutical prices, the raising of prices of just about any commodity, the inability of most people to retire well when years ago retirement was a lock for anyone who did the least amount to save. I know this is true because my parents had Tier 1 benefits in New York City, which left them beyond comfortable, despite being civil servants. Retirement is a problem. Living from paycheck to paycheck is a problem. These are problems that affect Rust Belt, Wall Street, and everyone in between, and the results are devastating. That is the concern of these videos. Now, my name is Neil Douglas Newton. My wife has reminded me that I have not identified myself, which does something to my credibility. Please find me on Facebook under Neil Douglas Newton. That's my main page at this point. Thank you for listening.